The barn went dead silent for a moment, like the whole building was holding its breath. Then came the unmistakable sound of hooves dragging across the concrete. Slow, heavy, curious. The guests inside looked around, uncertain. Someone laughed, nervously. Karen squinted toward the back of the barn where the string lights didn't quite reach. Then Macho let out a deep, guttural snort. A woman shrieked, glasses clinked, chairs scraped. Guests surged toward the front doors like startled cattle themselves. Karen raised her arms like she could calm the panic. But the fear spread like wildfire. One of the guests, a man in khakis and boat shoes, tried to exit, but I casually stepped in front of the barn doors, leaning against the frame. "Where's the fire?" I asked, calm as a summer breeze. "What the hell is in there?" he barked. "My bulls," I replied. "All three of them, they live here, remember? But you can't just," he started, but was cut off by the sound of something heavy slamming into a table. People screamed again. A crash followed, and one of the string lights snapped loose and swung from the rafters like a ghost in a horror film. Karen stomped toward me, heels clacking over the barn floor. "This is your fault," she hissed, face flushed. "No," I said, "this is your party. I just provided the guests of honor." Behind her, I saw movement. Macho was coming into view, his massive frame pushing through the dim light. His eyes reflected red in the glow, and strands of party streamers hung from one of his horns. He looked like a parade float from hell. "You're insane," Karen screamed, grabbing her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Please do," I said, "and while you're at it, ask if they're free for trespassing cases." Another crash. A folding table flew across the barn like a cardboard box. People pushed past Karen, ignoring her clipboard and cocktail dress. Climbing over hay bales and scrambling outside windows like it was a sinking ship. Macho stood in the center of the barn now, head low, pawing the floor. The other two bulls flanked him, equally annoyed at the intrusion. Karen backed away slowly, her phone still in her hand. Too shaken to even speak. I took my time walking to the side entrance and unlocked it, one by one. People spilled out, their nice shoes caked in manure and hay. Someone had hay stuck in their hair. A woman sobbed about her lost purse. I looked at Karen. "Next time you want to throw a party," I said, "try a community center. You'll regret this," she snapped. Storming off toward her dented Lexus, a trail of streamers was stuck to the roof, fluttering in the wind like a clown's tail. I waited until they were all gone. Then I walked back into the barn, patted Macho on the side, and whispered, "You were brilliant, buddy." He snorted once, then wandered to his stall, like it had been just another day. I turned off the lights and closed the barn doors behind me. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was mine again. But I had a feeling this wasn't over. Not with Karen. Not with the HOA. Not by a long shot. I thought the barn incident would have ended things. Anyone with half a brain would have taken the embarrassment and backed off quietly. But Karen wasn't like most people. The next morning, I found a bright orange flyer taped to my front gate. All caps. Bold letters. Smelled like cheap perfume and entitlement. Urgent. Notice of livestock. Violation. Unapproved animals within HOA limit. I laughed. I wasn't in the HOA's jurisdiction. My land was zoned agricultural long before their beige little suburb even existed. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about control. And revenge. By lunchtime, two things happened that made it clear she was upping the game. First, animal control showed up. A city truck pulled up beside my mailbox and out stepped a young guy in khakis and sunglasses, clipboard in hand. He looked fresh out of college and way too polite to be doing Karen's dirty work. "Sir," he said, clearing his throat, "we received a report of aggressive livestock and unsafe conditions for community events held on your property." I raised an eyebrow. Community events. He flipped through his notes. "Apparently a neighborhood gathering was disrupted by your bulls." I stepped closer, arms folded. "Let me ask you something. Did the report mention who threw the unauthorized party in my livestock barn?" He hesitated. "No sir, thought so," I said. "Come on, I'll show you around." I gave him the grand tour, clean stalls, ample fencing, all up to code. I even showed him Macho, who was lazily munching on hay, looking about as dangerous as a sleepy dog. By the end of it, the officer shook my hand. "You're good," he said. "This place is in better shape than most commercial farms I've seen." "Thanks," I replied, watching his truck disappear down the road. "Tell Karen I said hi." But that wasn't all. An hour later, I spotted a drone hovering above my property. It buzzed like an angry hornet, floating just over the barn roof. Camera pointed. Down. A surveillance drone. HOA issued. Probably. Or maybe Karen's nephew was majoring in invasion of privacy. I climbed up onto my ATV, grabbed a long extension pole from the back, and poked it hard. The drone spun sideways, lost control, and crashed into the dirt like a dead bug. I left it there. Maybe Karen would come pick up the pieces herself. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I knew this kind of woman didn't stop after losing once. She doubled down. She got petty. She made things personal. I started prepping. I reinforced the fencing, added new security cameras, and installed a brand new lock system on the barn. Motion lights, alarms, the works. If Karen wanted to start a Cold War, I was ready to make it. I even called my buddy Hank, who ran a feedlot just outside town, told him to bring the trailer over in a couple days. I had an idea. The bulls weren't going anywhere, but maybe I could give Karen a taste of her own chaos. Controlled, loud, legal chaos. As I turned off the lights that night and looked out, across the pasture, I could see the HOA houses glowing in the distance. Cookie-cutter perfection. Probably sipping wine and talking about how they were going to deal with the farmer. But I wasn't some clueless country guy. I had a plan, and it involved manure, speakers, and permits. Let's just say, the next party was going to be mine. 2 days later, the neighborhood was buzzing, and not just from gossip. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to address what she called the livestock menace, threatening our community values. Flyers were slipped into mailboxes. A post went up on the HOA's Facebook page. Even a few laminated notices got stapled to fence posts, including mine. I pulled one down and read it out loud to Macho, who seemed unimpressed. Agenda, reckless, bull ownership, community safety violations, and voter action to demand zoning review. It wasn't just personal anymore. She wanted to take this to the city. She wanted to shut me down permanently. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already been to City Hall. A decade ago, when I first bought this land, I made sure it was ironclad, zoned for livestock, protected under county ag laws, and most importantly, not under the HOA's control. That didn't stop her from trying. The emergency meeting was scheduled for Saturday at 5 p.m. in the cul-de-sac at the end of Magnolia Lane. That was Karen's kingdom. Her lawn was the only one in the neighborhood with imported Italian grass and a nitrogen monoxide truck's parking sign staked into the curb. I called Hank that morning. "You bring the trailer?" I asked. "Yup," he said. "And the fertilizer?" "Loaded." We met just after noon and backed up a massive livestock trailer covered in tarps right to the edge of her street. I had everything I needed, an extension permit for public parking thanks to my cousin on the city board, to industrial grade, speakers, a generator, and a mic. I didn't need to crash her meeting. I was going to host my own. Right next to it, when 4:45 p.m. rolled around, the cul-de-sac filled with folding chairs, clipboards, and retirees in pastel polos. Karen stood near her garden archway like a queen addressing her court. I stayed back until she started speaking. "As members of this peaceful community," she said, "we must come together to protect our families, our children, and our values from agricultural encroachment." That's when I flipped the switch. The generator kicked on with a hum. The speakers lit up. I walked to the mic and spoke calmly, just loud enough to interrupt her HOA sermon. "Good evening, everyone," I said. "My name is Jack Miller. You may know me as the guy with the bulls." Heads turned. Some people looked curious. A few looked excited. Karen looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. "I just wanted to remind you all," I continued, "that the land I live on is older than this HOA, this development, and probably that weird lawn statue Karen thinks is tasteful." A few neighbors chuckled. Even some of her usual lapdogs smirked. "I legally own livestock. I legally operate on agricultural zoning. And I legally parked this trailer on this street because I filed a noise permit for tonight." Karen's face twitched. "What noise?" Right on cue, Hank opened the trailer. Out came two bulls, not macho, but big enough to impress. They were calm, tied to the trailer, and behind a small fence setup, but they weren't alone. Behind them was a giant bin of manure. Still steaming. Then I clicked play on the speaker system. Loud, twangy country music burst to life. Not just music, but recordings of bull grunts, stomps, and mooing, echoing down Magnolia Lane. Karen's HOA meeting dissolved in seconds. People got up, confused, some laughing, some plugging their ears. Someone yelled, "Is that poop?" Another asked if this was legal. I waved my permit in the air. Completely legal. And, by the way, this is a public street. Just wanted to share some of the farm life with the neighbors. Karen stormed toward me, red-faced and furious. "You can't do this." But I just did. And I wasn't done yet. I figured after the party poop parade, Karen would retreat, lick her wounds, maybe put up a do not disturb sign and disappear into a bottle of overpriced Chardonnay. But Karen didn't back down. She doubled down by Monday morning. 3 things landed on my desk. A formal code violation complaint from the City A letter, from friends of the HOA demanding I remove dangerous wildlife, and a visit from a real estate agent who just wanted to talk about possibly buying me out before things got messy. I knew exactly who sent him. Karen's behind this, isn't she? I asked the realtor, watching him sweat in his loafers. I can't comment on that, he stammered. But her group is offering double the market value for your land. I laughed, let her triple it. This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. And that's when it hit me. Karen didn't just want revenge. She wanted the land. That's why she was suddenly dragging the HOA into things. Filing permits, trying to make my life a maze of bureaucratic traps. She wasn't trying to shut me down, just to get even. She was laying groundwork for a takeover, but she had no idea what she was walking into. See, the land she was after. It wasn't just dirt and fencing. It was protected. 20 years ago, my grandfather filed a historic designation request. Turns out, part of our property used to be an old cavalry rest stop during the Civil War. The barn sat on land that once sheltered Union horses and stored supplies for troops headed west. The designation had been buried under a stack of paperwork, forgotten by everyone except me. I had the documents, the maps, even a metal box full of letters from soldiers who passed through the land in the 1860s. I knew that if I played this card, it would end her assault completely, but part of me wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. I wanted her to make the next move, show just how far she was willing to go, and she didn't disappoint. The very next evening, I came home to flashing lights and a white pickup truck parked near my fence. Animal control. Again. 2 officers stood near the gate, one holding a tranquilizer gun, the other reading from a clipboard. "Mr. Miller," the taller one asked. "We've had a report of an aggressive bull charging a neighborhood jogger. We've been asked to remove the animal until further notice." "Who reported it?" "Anonymous tip," he said. "Right, anonymous, with perfect HOA handwriting." No doubt, I led them to the pasture. Macho stood there, chewing cud, staring at them like they were made of tofu. They inspected him, his hooves, his pen, even my video feed from the barn cam. After 20 minutes, they sighed. "Everything looks in order," the officer said. "Sorry to waste your time." I watched them drive off, and that's when I made my decision. If Karen wanted war, I'd give her one, but with history on my side. That night, I went into the attic, dusted off the old box, and pulled out the cavalry documents. Original maps, signed letters, black and white photos of men with rifles standing where my barn now stood. I wasn't just a guy with bulls. I was a historical steward of land that couldn't be bulldozed, rezoned, or swallowed up by HOA votes. And now it was time to teach Karen a lesson that would echo through every cookie-cutter home on Magnolia Lane. It didn't take long for word to get out. By Thursday, whispers of historic land and Civil War cavalry stop were making the rounds on HOA message boards. Some neighbors were impressed. Others rolled their eyes. But one person took it as a direct threat to her control. Karen, the next morning, a banner was draped across her white picket fence. Magnolia Lane's Real History Day. Sponsored by the HOA. I almost choked on my coffee. She wasn't just ignoring my claim. She was trying to overwrite it, fabricate her own history so people would stop asking questions about my land and focus on her HOA event instead. But I let her dig the hole. Because I had the shovel. Saturday arrived, and Magnolia Lane looked like it had swallowed a Renaissance fair and choked on a Civil War museum. Karen had rented white tents, hired actors dressed in stiff gray uniforms, and even set up fake cannons that looked like they'd been bought from a Halloween store. Kids ran around with paper muskets. HOA board members posed in front of a banner that read, 150 Years of Magnolia Lane History, Celebrating the Founders. I shook my head. Magnolia Lane hadn't even existed until 1992. I showed up late deliberately, rolled in on my ATV just as Karen was giving her grand speech into a mic connected to an underpowered speaker. And so today, she declared, we honor the true history of this land, a neighborhood founded on peace, progress, and responsible community standards. Polite claps followed. Then I stepped forward and plugged my speaker into my own generator. The sound that came out silenced the entire cul-de-sac, a booming, scratchy recording of a letter being read aloud, dated 1863. March 14th. We rest our horses near the West Ridge by the large oak barn. The farmer offered us beans and oats. We leave his land with thanks. Karen's face twisted. I held up the original letter, laminated and sealed. This, I said, holding it high, is from a Union cavalryman stationed on what is now my barn. Dated, sealed, and recognized by the County Preservation Office. I pulled out a second document, the official historical designation certificate, and this, I added, is what makes my land a protected historic site, under Ordinance 34.5C, which means no zoning changes, no forced sales, no HOA votes. Gasps. People turned to Karen. She stammered, gripping her mic like it might save her. That can't be real. It is, I replied. Filed by my grandfather, approved by the county, and ratified by the state. Then I brought out the final touch, an 8x10 photo of my great-grandfather, standing in front of the barn in 1935, holding a cavalry saber. You threw a party in that barn, I said, then tried to erase its history. But this barn stood. Before your neighborhood was even a dirt path. The silence was thick. A man in the crowd cleared his throat. Honestly, I'd rather have a cavalry barn than another HOA block party. A few people chuckled. Someone clapped. Karen yanked the mic cord out of her speaker and stormed back toward her house, furious and humiliated. Her foam cannon tipped over, soaking the reenactors. I gave a little bow. But deep down, I knew this was still just the opening act. Karen was petty. But she wasn't stupid. If she couldn't beat me with bylaws or fake history, she'd come after something else. And I had a bad feeling about what, or who, that might be. The cavalry letter shut her up in public. For a while, but behind closed doors, Karen was seething. You could feel it, the way she walked past my property now, without her usual smug stare. She wasn't trying to beat me anymore. She was trying to hurt me. And when that didn't work, she went after the one thing I cared about more than my pride. My bulls. It started with little things. One morning I found the feed bin open, not just open, spiked with crushed Galapagos and what smelled like bleach. Luckily, I checked the feed every morning, and Macho had been too smart to eat it. I filed a police report. No cameras caught it, but I knew who did it. 3 days later, a new HOA petition began circulating, a paper titled, Immediate Removal of Large Livestock Due to Health and Safety Concerns. It had one signature at the top in curling cursive. Karen Witherspoon, HOA chairwoman. That night, I installed 2 brand new 4K security cameras, one pointing toward the pasture, the other at the back fence, the one nearest to Karen's yard. Then I waited. Sure enough, it didn't take long. 3:12 a.m. Thursday morning, my phone pinged. Motion detected. I checked the feed and nearly dropped my coffee. A shadow moved along the back fence. A figure in black leggings, hoodie, gloves. She crept along the edge of the pasture with a bucket in one hand. Her face wasn't clear, but the blonde hair poking out the side. The Louis Vuitton gloves. The rhinestone belt. There was no doubt Karen. She slipped through a side gap in the fence, slowly made her way toward the feed trough, same one she tampered with before. This time, I wasn't going to just file a report. I pressed the button. A massive halogen spotlight clicked on. Loudspeaker blared. You're trespassing on private property. Law enforcement has been notified. She froze. Bucket hit the ground. Then she ran full sprint back toward the fence, but tripped over the same loose wire I'd left on purpose. She went down hard, face first into a patch of mud and manure, and the cameras caught every second. By the time she scrambled over the fence, screaming and covered in muck, I was already on the phone with the sheriff. They came within the hour. Karen tried to spin the whole thing. I was checking on the animals. I thought one was hurt. I got lost at night in my own neighborhood, but the footage said otherwise. And what's more, the sheriff saw the bucket. Inside, a homemade mix of chili powder, oil, and crushed glass. For bulls to eat. That wasn't sabotage. That was animal cruelty. She was arrested on the spot, still cursing, screaming that I set her up, that I had it coming. I watched as the cruiser pulled away. But I didn't smile. Not because she didn't deserve it, she did. But because people like Karen don't stop with one arrest. They find lawyers, friends in high places, loopholes, and deep down, I knew this wasn't over. This wasn't about property anymore. It wasn't even about power. Karen had turned it into something else. Warfare HOA style. But now, I had the upper hand. Public sympathy, legal footage, and a neighborhood that had seen her for who she really was. She tried to poison my bulls, so now, I was going to gut her kingdom. Karen spent 48 hours behind bars, and somehow, when she got out, she was angrier than ever. The neighborhood expected her to lay low. Maybe even resign from the HOA. After all, she was caught red-handed, on night vision camera, trying to poison livestock. But Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. No, she returned with something far worse. Lawyers, 3 of them, to be exact, and within a week, she filed a motion through the HOA board for an emergency re-election and policy overhaul. The real kicker, they backed her well. Most of them did. That's when the letters started arriving, thick envelopes with HOA headers, demanding that I appear before a special hearing to discuss the suitability of livestock ownership and historical zoning within the residential aesthetic. They were trying to rewrite the bylaws. One neighbor, old Mrs. Cartwright, knocked on my door with one of the letters in her hand. "I got this too," she said, frowning. "They're saying you're devaluing the neighborhood. But my property value's gone up since you moved in." I smiled. "That's not about property. It's about power." She nodded. "You gonna let her win?" "Not a chance." See, what Karen didn't know was that I'd been doing some digging of my own. While she was lawyering up, I'd been at the county clerk's office, poring through dusty binders, municipal contracts, and HOA incorporation papers from over 20 years ago. And what I found was gold. It turns out, when Magnolia Lane's HOA was first formed, it never officially completed its charter renewal after its 10-year term. A simple oversight, but one with massive consequences. Technically, the HOA had been operating without legal authority for the past 7 years. That meant every bylaw they passed, every fee they collected, every vote they enforced, all of it, legally unenforceable. I didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, I showed up to the special hearing they scheduled, held under a pop-up tent in the same cul-de-sac where Karen had tried to stage her historical farce. Karen wore her Sunday best, cream blazer, clipboard, fake smile. She welcomed everyone like a senator running for re-election. "Today," she announced, "we take back our community." I stood near the back, waited, let her finish her speech, take her fake votes, pass her new proposals, and then I stepped forward. "Mind if I address the community?" I asked. Karen froze. "This isn't an open forum." "It is," I said, raising a thick folder. "When your HOA doesn't exist anymore." Murmurs broke out. I opened the folder and handed out copies of county documentation, all stamped and signed. "This is from the county clerk. As of 2018, the Magnolia Lane HOA failed to file for charter renewal. That means this organization hasn't had legal standing in 7 years." Gasps. Someone spilled a drink. Karen snatched a copy and flipped through. This is fake. You made this up. Feel free to verify with the clerk's office." I replied. "But until then, you're just a lady with a clipboard pretending to have power." People started whispering. Some laughed. Others took pictures of the documents. And just like that, Karen's empire began to collapse. Without a legal charter, she couldn't call votes, couldn't enforce fines, couldn't send violation letters. Her HOA was dead in the water, and everyone knew it. She stormed away again, red-faced and defeated. This time, though, there were no allies to back her, just silence. I looked around at the neighbors who'd watched everything unfold. Some nodded at me. One gave a slow clap. But I wasn't done yet. Not until I made sure she could never do this again. Not until the final move. Karen disappeared for a few days after the HOA collapse. No letters, no meetings, no backyard binocular spying. The neighborhood sighed in relief, like a storm had passed. Kids played in the cul-de-sac again. Neighbors waved more freely, but I knew better. Karen wasn't gone. She was reloading. And I was ready. I spent that weekend doing what any sane man with bulls and a historic cavalry barn would do. I lawyered up, too. Not out of fear, but for precision, because I wasn't just going to win. I was going to end the game. Monday morning. Karen emerged in a suit this time, with a camera crew and a man in a slim black tie beside her. Local news. She'd called in a sympathy piece. The reporter spoke into the mic. Today we're following a local woman, Karen Witherspoon, who claims she's the victim of harassment and land abuse after exposing illegal livestock operations. That's when my lawyer stepped out of the barn. He handed the reporter a stack of notarized documents and offered one quote. This isn't a story about harassment. It's about a woman pretending to run a government body that hasn't legally existed in years. Caught on camera committing a felony. The crew paused. The cameraman blinked. Karen turned pale. The reporter stepped away to verify the documents. Meanwhile, I walked up to Karen calm, deliberate. You wanted your HOA to rule this land, I said, so I made sure it never would again. She sneered. What did you do? I smiled. I gave it away. That stopped her cold. Gave what away? The land, I said, pointing to the barn and pasture. Not to a developer. Not to a trust fund. I gave it to the State Historical Preservation Board. Irrevocable. Protected in perpetuity. She gasped. That's impossible. Nope, it's now officially state-protected cavalry heritage land, I said. You can't rezone it, build on it, or even set foot on it without permission. That barn you partied in. Now owned by the state. I'm just the caretaker. She looked like she'd swallowed a wasp. Enjoy your fenced yard, Karen, I added, because I own everything around it. And you'll never touch it again. That wasn't even the final twist. That night, a video went viral online. Karen, in night vision, sneaking into my pasture, caught red-handed. It hit over 1.2 million views in 48 hours, with the title, HOA Karen tried to poison bulls, got wrecked by rancher with receipts. Comments poured in. This man is a hero. Can we get him to run my HOA? She messed with the wrong bull. Karen tried to sue me for emotional damage. It was dismissed in under 10 minutes by the end of the month. She'd quietly sold her house and left Magnolia Lane altogether. No goodbye party. No farewell message. Just silence. And me. I added a plaque to the barn wall. It read, to those who protect the land past, present, and future. You may take the power from the paper, but not from the people. Macho got a new shelter. The bulls roamed in peace, and every so often, people from the local schools or history centers would come visit the barn. No HOA. No noise complaints. Just stories passed down, neighbors who'd learned their lesson. And one very satisfied caretaker of a legacy no one could touch, and that's how Karen learned the oldest rule of the West. Never pick a fight with the man who owns the land beneath your feet, especially when he's got bulls, cameras, and a better lawyer.